Hi, everybody. Hey, Harvey. Hello. Hi, Kelly.
Oh, hey.
You good?
Yeah, very well. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I have expensive taste. I reached out to Michelle from the Tallits, and all the ones that I like are about like $240, which I'm thinking about it because they are beautiful.
I think that's kind of her. Does she have many that are cheaper? I don't
Well,
even know.
that's what I was gonna just write back to her to see what other choices she has. But Phil and I were talking about it today. I think I'm gonna write back to her, and I shared it with Jenny and Susan. I think that's all. But yeah.
Well, just so you know, I signed up for Peacock and
Oh.
I'm already signed up. I haven't had a chance to try it out yet, but I am thinking about what I want to watch on the Peacock. So
Yeah, no, that's yeah. In fact, you just reminded me because as an employee, I get like a free higher level subscription thing, and I want to check it out too. And I just have like I said, I'm fortunate. I've been really busy with my work, so I'm fine. But it's been really crazy busy. So
yeah.
Like the hat, Rabbi.
Thank you. This is my hat as I have this is a holiday. It's holiday night tonight, so I'm ready to go with my hat, with my holiday hat on. I was thinking about wearing a baseball hat right now, but a baseball hat, looking at it makes me sad. So I didn't want to wear a baseball cap. It's just too sad right now. I can't my first game that I had tickets for was May. Well, I may have seen a game before, but my first ticket that I had was for a game May 2nd down in San Diego with my daughter. And for some reason on Ticketmaster, it still says it's postponed. They haven't returned my money for it, but I mean, when's it going to get postponed to? So yeah, it is what it is. I mean, it is going to be it's going to be a strange season once it starts.
If there's a season.
I get sad though. I look at that hat and I'm like, it makes me sad. It was Jackie Robinson Day today too, right?
Yeah.
I can't even
Yep.
remember. Every day is becoming part of the one before that. But it is really hard to keep track of time. Though we will say as we get going tonight, it's the seventh night of the Omer, the seventh day, or the beginning of the seventh day of the counting of the Omer, and it's a Chag. It's technically the end of the holiday of Pesach is a holiday. So this is considered a Chag. This is a day we're not supposed to be working. We're supposed to be
We're not.
we're not working, and it's not the intermediate days that what we call Kol Moed and come to the end. And some people see this as kind of like a second Passover, and
It's also Yisker, isn't it?
and I was just going to say that we just lit the Yisker candle just literally like 5 minutes ago. We lit it for my mom. It's not quite dark out, but we're we had dinner and lit the candles for the Chag because you can light the holiday candles, say the blessing shel Yom Tov, and so we did that at the end of Passover. We get into the kind of the holiday, and it does say in the Bible this is the last day. This is a holiday, so we'll take a look at it in the Torah in a few weeks. Gonna let in some more people and get everybody together. So again, good Yom Tov, everybody, and probably this may be the first time you've ever celebrated the last days of Pesach as a Hag. This for some of you, again, outside of the Orthodox world, there are not many people who keep the end of the Chag the way that our ancestors did not too long ago. That these days were considered a Chag. But I mean, look, it's hard enough taking off Passover for people at the beginning of the holiday or observing it. So I do recognize again that it is unusual for some of you maybe to be celebrating, but you're having a Pesach in a very traditional way. At least when it comes to observance of not working. When it comes to what you're eating, I have nothing to do with that, and I have no judgment on what people are eating. But I will tell you that I am looking forward to, as I mentioned yesterday, it's strange because we're going from restriction to restriction, which is an unusual situation to be in Judaism and the Jewish concept. When you go from one thing and you're not really changing,
Yeah, I'm just.
we're going into more restrictions. But I know I'm going to enjoy eating something tomorrow night. I'm thinking of having a dinner of nothing but donuts. That's an indication of how I'm eating my sadness. I'm thinking of literally having just donuts, like a hors d'oeuvre donut, an entree donut, and then a dessert donut. I've planned it out. I've obviously thought about it. This has already been thought of. Conceptualized.
Can't eat donuts.
I've conceptualized it. I know. I apologize for those who can't or don't want to eat garbage like that. I'm just dreaming.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. You're good.
Okay.
So anyways, we're just wishing everybody a Chag Sameach as you came on. And again, we're at a time of Yizkor. We're at a time of remembrance. Definitely a time to think about those who passed. There are obviously people who are, I have a funeral, unfortunately, on Friday for somebody who died of cancer, a very young person. It's hard to think about anything other than what we're dealing with virus, but people are still dying of other stuff. And the guy who died was 54, died of kidney cancer. And I thought to myself, we're fighting such a war against a disease, a virus that is scary, and it's obviously it's scary because it's something we can transmit and is the nature of any kind of virus or pandemic. It's scary because it can be transmitted. But if we thought of cancer in the same way, think about what we would do if we upended our lives, all of us as a world, to battle cancer, which quite frankly kills so many more people and in some ways has such a lower mortality rate. I mean, at the end of the day, in this country, 96% of the people who get corona are going to survive. 96% of the people who get pancreatic cancer are going to die. And again, I know it's not comparable because one's transmitted, but if we waged a war on cancer the way we're waging a war right now on a virus. So that's my little rant for the night. I just thought about it tonight as I was, observing Yizkor for my mom and all the other people who, we've lost, and friends and family that have died of cancer, that, if we waged a truly war like we are now, the millions, the trillions of dollars that we're spending, the millions of hours of work hours that have been devoted towards this, to a disease that's going to unfortunately kill a lot more of us than this will. So anyways, I didn't want to get off topic, but it is Yizkor, and it is a time to think about the big picture to some extent. So anyways, people, I hope you keep healthy, and I hope you're doing what you need to do. Any other holiday reflections? I want to make sure we recognize the holiday tonight and the fact that this is a time of celebrating them. It's a chag. It's a time of finishing Passover, but also thinking about what we're doing in our lives as a whole. So, and as I mentioned, it is the seventh night of Omer, or seventh day. We're beginning the seventh day, the night that begins the seventh day in counting. So I thought we would look on to the eighth day. It's an interesting segue because today we're on Parshat Shemini. We're reading what happens after last week. We didn't have class, so to remind people, we're now into the third portion, the third section of Leviticus, of Vayikra. And tonight is a special night because we're actually going to read a narrative. And we don't get a lot of story in Leviticus. We get no story really. This week we get a story. So hopefully you'll forgive me if I get too excited about a narrative, but it's a pretty good lesson. It's a pretty good narrative. It's not very long. and we're going to read it tonight again, I was hoping we'd, by this, well, I'll give it another minute, but I was hoping we'd get a large group tonight, because for people who like stories,
I like stories. No dead animals.
I know you do. I know you do. For those who like stories, this is the only story we're going to get for a while, at least a story from the Torah. You can give us other stories, Phyllis, and everybody else.
Doesn't like dead animals, but she likes dead people, I guess. Likes the story.
Well, this story is a little bit about dead animals, but more importantly, again, it's unfortunately about dead people, and most importantly, our ancestors, who were the Kohanim, the priests, what they're dealing with. And it's a very strange story in a way, a lot of ways, but it's a very interesting story because it comes at a time when we're supposed to be, as Jews, we're really supposed to be celebrating what our people are going through. They've just dedicated the Mishkan. They've just dedicated the tabernacle. And with that, by the way, I want to take a moment, and we're going to go, I want to put us up on Facebook as we actually start the shindig right now. And I want to put this up there for everybody. I generally, by the way, I'm trying to let people know that we're on Facebook, including our group, because you never know who's going to watch on Facebook. The thing about Facebook is nobody can comment, can join the conversation on Facebook, but it does allow us to share out, and maybe people then join up and be part of the dialogue and the discussion. So we're going to do this right now. I think we're about ready to hit the, we will in 1 second. We'll be ready to, oh, this is really, it's going in through the, it's going in through like screen within screen within screen right now. It's kind of spooky. Where does it end? Hold it 1 second. We're going to go live, and now we're live. So, wow, lots of stuff happening. Passover, Yizkor, Omer.
Today is the anniversary of crossing the Sea of Reeds.
Crossing the Sea of Reeds.
Tomorrow, the seventh day. It took them 7 days. And it's the anniversary.
Yeah, of based on the Omer, correct. Based on the Passover, the counting of Passover, correct. That's right. That's a good thing. By the way, it's also a good thing that sometimes you go away from the computer when you're talking, Ronnie, and then we lose you.
I'm sorry.
There you go. That's better. So we love hearing from you. So please get closer when you're talking.
Phyllis won't let me
You have me on. It's Hal Kerbel.
Hal, of course you're. Well, let's get Hal on. I don't know. Yeah, you're on.
Okay. I was having some problems. Good, Mark. Thank you.
You're there. Thanks, Hal.
Thanks.
So, and we are live on the Facebook right now. So, no, I don't think no. So, wait a second. Yeah, there we are. So we have actually 5 people that are watching us right now on Facebook. So let's again recap. Last week we were on last week we were at Passover. The week before we were reading Tzav. We were reading the portion that, like the previous portion, Vayikra, was outlining the sacrifices that the Israelites were supposed to give, and most importantly, what the Kohanim were supposed to do in order to make it so that they could do those sacrifices, so that they could go through with the rest of the sacrifices that will keep the people holy, that will purify them, will cleanse them, will help them get free of their sins, their mistakes, all of those things that are going to help us be holy in the days that we offered up sacrifices. And here we come to the 8th day. So after a week of dedication of the temple, of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle, it's now time for business. And on the opening day of business, as we like to say, on the first day of not really dedication anymore, of the soft opening or the grand opening festivities, when we start getting down to work, the priests, the Kohanim, this is what happens. We've got and we'll start right here at the beginning. On the 8th day, so 7 days of dedication. Now the 8th day, Moses called Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel. He said to Aaron, take a calf of the herd for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering without blemish, and bring them to the Lord. And speak to the Israelites, saying, take a he-goat for a sin offering, a calf and a lamb, and a yearlings without blemish for a burnt offering, and an ox and a ram for an offering of well-being to sacrifice before the Lord. A meal offering with oil mixed in, for today the Lord will appear to you. Brought to the front of the tent of meeting the things that Moses had commanded, and the whole community came forward and stood before the Lord. So they're basically doing the work that they've been told that they're going to do in the last couple of portions. They're getting to work. And now it says, again, Moses told Aaron to come forward and offer up your sin offering, make expiation for yourself and for the people. Aaron came forward and slaughtered his calf. And then Aaron's sons brought the blood to him, the blood that from the sacrifice. He dips it in his finger in the blood and he puts it on the horns of the altar. Again, these are all descriptions of, these are fulfillments of what he was commanded to do. Everything is going the way it's supposed to go. Now, we're going to skip down a little bit.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I know, Phyllis. We don't need to see this. The offerings are there. I will say that he elevates these offerings, shows the offerings before the people. I'm only saying that because that's actually going to come back later on in the story. And then it says, Moses and Aaron then went outside the tent of meeting. When they came out, they blessed the people. The presence of the Lord appeared to all of the people. Now, again, according to tradition, what did they bless them with? Well, they bless them with the prayer that we hear later on in Numbers. That the priests give the priestly benediction here. It doesn't say it, but it says that they blessed them. And the rabbis interpreted that to mean that they knew that blessing. They got that blessing already. So then it says, the last line of chapter 9, fire came forth from the Lord and consumed the burnt offering and the fat parts on the altar. And all the people saw and shouted and fell on their faces. Again, everything is going as planned. Everything in chapter 9 seems to be good. And you know where I'm going because we take a commercial break and then we come back for chapter 10. And here's what it says. Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu, each took out his fire pan, put fire in it, laid incense on it, and they offered before the Lord alien fire, which he had not enjoined upon them. And the fire came forth from the Lord and consumed them. Thus they died at the instance of the Lord. Then Moses said to Aaron, this is what the Lord meant when he said, through those near to me shall I show myself holy and gain glory before all the people. And Aaron was silent. That's all it says. And that's the narrative. Now, it continues on, but this is all we read about of the actual death. There's one line. Now, I'm saying that this is remarkable because this is an important scene. No matter what, this is an important scene. It's a dramatic scene. It's a scene that it's disturbing. There are questions that are natural to have with this scene. And let's talk a little bit about this scene for a second before we move on and see the aftermath, which, by the way, is fairly, without ruining it for you, is fairly descriptive, not very descriptive, not very detailed, very basic, but not a lot of comment on it, not a lot of explanation no explanation really about what exactly happened. So this scene of the actual death is all we have about the death in the Torah. Of course, there's a lot in the rabbinic writings about this. There's a lot that the rabbis wrote in the Midrash and the Talmud about this scene. And they were, the rabbis were shocked, upset, to some extent, feeling like they had to explain what happens in this scene because the details in the Torah are limited.
Very limited.
Because what we have is literally that they took a fire pan to put the incense on it. They offered it an alien fire, though, and then the fire consumed them and they died. That's it. I mean, literally, the amount of words in Hebrew is even less than it is in English.
But Mark,
It's about
it also
10 words.
says that it's an alien fire.
Yep.
And it says it's an alien fire, and it's not something that the Lord ordained, called for, not enjoined upon them. And
Yeah.
that's important.
Yeah. So that's clearly what the problem was, right? Was the fire, the two parts of it are the alien fire and the part that God did not command it. Now, you could say, well, it's an alien fire and God didn't command it. But both of those things allow for interpretation, explanation. They're launching points for the commentary on what actually happens. Interestingly, the rabbis teach in one place in the Talmud that there's actually 4 different things that they did that were wrong. Some of them are obvious and some of them are not obvious. And some of them we have to kind of read ahead to see what is the problem. But all of it, to some extent, is difficult because there's so little information about what actually happened. What was the alien fire? Why did they go a little bit too far? What was the real problem here? Was it doing something that God didn't command? Was it the alien fire? Was it the fact that they're priests? All of those are launching points for the rabbis. And there's this other kind of like bigger question, which is, did their role as priests, and specifically being the sons of Aaron, was that part of the issue too? Was the fact that they were expected to behave even better than everybody else, was that also what was going on here? So there's a lot of questions that are raised from the lack of detail in this. And I think the biggest issue that the rabbis have, that we have with this, is it seems as though the punishment is way out of proportion. On the face of it, it seems like it's way out of proportion to the crime.
Right.
And so we have to then kind of figure out, well, maybe this stuff all adds up to something that really required this kind of response, this kind of even if it's not disproportionate way we feel, it's disproportionate response. And again, getting back to this other issue, which is, this is the first day of business. This is like the grand opening, which was a week-long grand opening. After that, this is the first thing that happens when you're in business. It's literally like the restaurant burning down the first day it opened, or I can't even, you have a amusement park, and the ride crash, there's a disaster on one of the rides the first day it opens. That's what's so horrible about this scene too. So a lot of people forget, they just say, oh, Nadav and Avihu. Yeah, I know that story. They were Aaron's sons and they died. Yeah, they died on the first day that they were working. And doesn't God cut these people any slack? I mean, they just opened up. They were new to they were new to what they were doing. So all those things go into this discussion too. They all factor into this. If you just say, oh, Nadav and Avihu were doing some alien fire and then they messed around and that's why they died. Okay, but think about everything that's also here. That's there without having to imagine what types of things were happening. So does anybody? I've seen a couple. One of the things that Francine just said was what is the alien fire? Ronnie, you picked up on obviously the issue of the alien fire right away. So what did you want to say something about the alien fire?
Well, I mean, I know know what's in the commentaries, so I don't want to spoil it for everybody else.
No, you're not spoiling it. Well, don't get to one of the other issues which we haven't read yet. I do want to get to that because it's in the text. It is not in this yet, but we will get to it. But what about the alien fire?
A thought just entered my head. This looks like human sacrifice, which is really weird. I mean, the Lord sends a fire to consume them. It's as if God wants a human sacrifice the first day. That thought just crossed my mind.
So okay, and we
It's
know
bizarre.
I understand. So we know that God wouldn't normally. I mean, God doesn't want to have human sacrifice, but there is a human sacrifice the first day. I mean, by default, there's a human sacrifice. Not by plan, but by what happens. So what do you get out of that? I mean, what's your Ronnie, what's your takeaway from that?
Well, I mean, the commentaries I've read, the rabbis don't even deal with that. They come up with all kinds of other rationalizations. The Nabab and Abihu were drunk.
That's the part I wanted you to wait on, but that's okay.
Bad daddy. They brought the wrong incense. You have to really be obsessive about what you do when you walk into that tabernacle. And then the other side is Nadab and Abihu, who is so holy that this was an act of love, that God brought them up to heaven and they were consumed from the inside. I mean, the commentaries go all over the place with this.
Okay, so let's talk about the one that you just gave, which I would have shared. It's a good one to share, but it's one of the more unusual ones, which is the last one that you just offered, which is a weird one because on the face of it, it seems to be wholly against the plain reading of the text. Why don't you repeat what I'm what I'm referring to?
Well, I mean, one of the commentaries is that these two men were so holy that as soon as they walked in with their incense pans, they were consumed from inside out and went right up to heaven, or right up to whatever we think of as heaven, because they were holy people. This wasn't a punishment. This was a reward, which is peculiar, right?
Yeah, and it's peculiar for a lot of reasons because
You're dead.
Well, God's comment back to Aaron and Moses was, or actually Moses says it to Aaron, this is what the Lord meant when he said, those near to me, I shall show myself holy and gain glory before all the people. And Aaron was silent. So from this doesn't seem so bad, or this seems like human sacrifice, it kind of is possible from that and from the other comment, which is that they died at the instance of the Lord. It doesn't say that they died in the anger of the Lord. It says, Vayamutu lifnei Adonai. They died before the Lord, which could be read, and again, it's a strange interpretation, definitely not the most obvious one, that God wanted them to be honored by the way they died. It doesn't seem to be the case because Aaron doesn't say anything, but he wants to say something, and it seems to be, I'm not happy that this just happened. Aaron's silence is powerfully kind of sad, tragic, because he keeps his mouth shut. You wouldn't think that he wanted to keep his mouth shut if he was really, really happy. It definitely wouldn't be as tragic. But maybe, he didn't want to lose his sons, but having them be lost on that first day allows them to kind of be sacrificed because they're ultra holy by that commentary. Again, that's not the normal commentary here, the normal stream of where the explanations were, but it is one. And as Ronnie, you mentioned that when you read this, you felt it was like human sacrifice. Well, that's why, because it's almost as if saying there seems to be a story in here that God is so powerful and the sacrifices are so powerful that it's like just a step away from human sacrifice. So it is interesting that is a commentary, a traditional commentary. And when you just read it, you walked away with this feeling like it's human sacrifice. Anybody else? Any comments? No? Everybody's so quiet. All right. Let's see if there's anything else in those first 3 verses. Anybody else? Okay. Well, then let's go on a little bit more. So they're dead. And as Ronnie said, there's an interpretation that they got burned from the inside out, that their insides were burned away, but outside that they were not burned. Why? Because when you read what happens here, it says, Moses called Mishael and Elzaphan, sons of Uzziel, the uncle of Aaron, and said, come forward and carry your kinsmen away from the front of the sanctuary to a place outside of the camp. So he calls them forward, and they're not Kohanim, right? They're not from the family of Aaron, but they're cousins. And by the way, notice here too, it says the sons of Uzziel, the uncle of Aaron. It's kind of a really complicated way of saying the word cousin. We don't have a word in Hebrew for cousin. It's weird, right? Because we really do have a lot of words. I mentioned just yesterday, we have a lot of words for family. And for, as Phyllis pointed out, we have a word in Yiddish. It's actually from Hebrew, machatonim, for in-laws, which, I guess we have in-laws, but it's 2 words. And it really doesn't convey family, by the way, if you think about it. Think about that, by the way, too, Phyllis. You pointed out machatonim is a Hebrew word. It means your in-laws, but machatonim means by marriage. In-laws mean that they're related to me in law, by law, by your marriage. It's but it's more by contract, by legal definition, not really by family or by connection in an emotional way. It's interesting that there's a different word for it. But again, we don't have a word for cousin in Hebrew. Modern Hebrew, we still call a cousin a ben dod, which means you're or a bat dod, a son or daughter of your uncle. So we have a word for uncle. We don't have a word for cousin. By the way, that's one of the weird things. Just made me remember something to add too. There's an example of that problem in the Bible later on when it talks about Mordecai and Esther, because we're told that Mordecai is Esther's uncle. It could be that it was actually an older cousin, because there is no word for cousin, and so maybe uncle was the word that they used in shorthand to be cousin, which means that she would have been a very eligible possible mate for Mordecai, if we read it that way, as cousin and not uncle. But I don't want to get too far off topic, but it's a fancy way again of saying Aaron, and also, by the way, Moses' cousin, that they come forward and as Kohanim, they wouldn't be able to touch. They would be rendered impure by the dead. So they bring in a close family, but not Kohanim, Levites. They're Levites. They will take the dead away. Yes. And they take them away by their tunics. They don't even take them away by their body. Come forward and take them away. And they came forward and took them out of the camp by their tunics as Moses had ordered. And Moses said to Aaron and to his sons Eleazar and Ithamar, the 2 remaining sons. So Aaron had 4 sons. 2 of them have died. 2 of them are now alive. Eleazar and Ithamar. Do not bare your heads and do not rend your clothes, lest you die in anger strike the whole community. But your kinsmen, all the house of Israel, shall bewail the burning that the Lord has wrought. By the way, that seems to be, this is more of a punishment, but maybe not. And do not go outside the entrance of the tent of meeting, lest you die. For the Lord's anointing oil is upon you. and they did as Moses had bidden. So that's what happens with the bodies. They're taken out. Now, there's a couple things here. Without getting too graphic and too upsetting, when they're taken away by their clothes, it seems disrespectful. But it also begs the question of what was left of them if they burned. Could they be taken out? If they burned up their bodies, you couldn't touch them because, first of all, they maybe were, they would fall apart in a kind of a gross way, that they're literally are ashes or not much left of the body. Maybe again, the body is super holy, as Ronnie was kind of talking about, as the traditional commentaries that give us that they're very holy, that they're actually extra holy. They definitely came in contact with God's fire, but all these might be reasons why they can't be taken out. I guess you could say that the possibility that there's even anything left of them would lead to the explanation that the rabbis give, that they were burned from the inside out, that their insides got burned, but not necessarily the outside of their body. Again, I don't want to get too graphic, but these are all the possibilities that are given to us by this very strange description of the way they're carried out. And the reality is that there's as much description of what happens after they die as there is to how they died. And so the Torah actually doesn't give us much detail about how they died, a little bit about after they die, but there still begs the question, which Francine just threw up there, which is, why does God seem to be so harsh?
And Mark, may I ask?
Yeah.
So why does Moses tell Aaron, don't show your mourning? Did you already comment on that?
No, we didn't talk about that yet. And it's absolutely connected to this issue, which is,
Right.
why is God putting these kinds of requirements on the family that seem to be completely without compassion?
But is this God through Moses, or is this Moses just talking to Aaron? Is there a reason that Moses would be saying these things to Aaron?
Interesting. It's an interesting point, Hal, because you're right. It says here, Moses said to Aaron, do not bare your heads. This doesn't seem to be, this isn't the words of God that's down here. That right there, it does not say, these are instructions that Moses is doing. There is no comment from God. There is no comment from God about why God's doing it and what's supposed to happen after they're done. It isn't. It's Moses making sense of it. God is going to speak in the next verse, and it's not about, it's not specifically about Aaron's sons. But so let's ask that question. Let's try to get some answers and discussion. I want to hear your take on, why is God so disproportionately harsh on Aaron? And if you want, why is Moses the one who's now dictating what Aaron is supposed to do in his grief? Anybody?
I don't know.
Well,
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do Kohanim have different mourning rituals than the rest of us?
Not for immediate relatives, but yes, they have different mourning rituals when it comes to other people who die, right? Because they're not allowed to go to us. They're not allowed to come in contact with the dead. But as far as how they mourn, so even if they're not allowed to go to a cemetery for non-immediate relatives, right? Because Kohanim are not allowed to come in contact with the dead unless it's an immediate relative. But they are allowed to mourn. Jewish tradition doesn't forbid a Kohen from mourning a person who died. There's no rule that a Kohen can't mourn. I think there's maybe an unspoken, there might be an unspoken message here, which you might be hinting at, which is there is a sense that as leaders of the community, they're not supposed to show their emotions, their sadness, their anger, their even if they're normal reactions, they're not supposed to grieve and act the way other people act. That is a possibility, by the way. That is one that's offered up. It's one that kind of strikes me as a sad expectation, but one that is a realistic expectation, which is maybe as priests, they needed to behave with a certain kind of dignity. Anybody else? Any other possibilities? Listen, we're going to get to the other one in a second that Ronnie's already mentioned about what's going on here. Yeah, and so Marina just put out the way that royalty and people like Jacqueline Kennedy and her family maintain. Well, I will tell you, the way people grieve and the way people present their mourning is something that we do judge. You know, we do have a sense of trying to maintain a certain, I mean, especially leaders, political leaders, trying to maintain a certain propriety and stoicism when they're mourning. I don't know if it makes it. I don't know. We have a certain there is something to say for expectations. I will offer this because we need to discuss it. It needs to be offered up. And it's a classical interpretation. Aaron, as we read just a few weeks ago, at the golden calf incident, seems to get away without being punished. He seems to do something really horrible, which is he doesn't stand up for Moses. He doesn't stand up for God. He doesn't seem to do anything to dissuade the people from building the golden calf. He cooperates with them. He aids and abets at the very least.
Well, he did try to stop them from making the golden calf, didn't he?
No, he doesn't. What he says is when Moses confronts him on it, he says, I couldn't do anything about them. But he didn't say I ever said anything. And he didn't say to them, hey, let's give him another day. He didn't say, you know, you're not supposed to do this. He didn't say it. The Torah doesn't recount anything that he says. So you know where I'm going here. There's an interpretation that this is the punishment. Now,
that would make sense.
It is a offering which they were making to the golden calf. It is something they did wrong, which now has a disproportionate effect, which is a disproportionate consequence, which is Aaron has now suffered more than any human being should ever suffer, losing a child. There's nothing worse than that. And he loses two. And he loses the children on a day that was supposed to be the celebration of the priesthood, supposed to be the greatest day. This is now the opening of a new way for the Jewish people to worship. It's a new way for them to connect to God. It's a new way for the priests to have a role to play for Aaron and his descendants for thousands of years. And they actually do for another 1,200 years or so. The priests, this is their first day in office. It's 1,200-year reign or dynasty, if you will. So this should have been an amazing day. This is the first day of work. It's a terrible first day. A terrible first day of opening. I guess there's a powerful lesson in there too, which is just because you had a bad opening doesn't mean that it's going to be bad forever. That you can have opening that's just horrific like this, but it doesn't mean that the legacy and the length of success that will follow. And I'm not a big advocate for sacrifice, as you know, but as a temple, as a way of offering, as a way of praying for the Jewish people, lasted a long time. We've done without it for 2,000 years too, by the way, I should point out. But for a good 1,200 years of our beginning of our history, we really needed it, and it was successful, and it helped us stay as a people. And one could argue that the temple that we eventually build in Jerusalem is the focal point of a community. It becomes our capital because of it. All those reasons, you could say this is a huge undertaking, the priesthood, and it'll involve generations of people. And by the way, even though they don't do anything, we still know who those people are. We still know the Kohanim. We still know who they are thousands of years later. But it starts off with a disaster, a full-on disaster. I mean, even if they offered up a wrong sacrifice, that would have been bad. But they offered up a wrong sacrifice, and then they die? This is horrific. And so Aaron to some extent is I mean, I hate to even use the word, but this is humbled. Aaron's humbled on his day of celebration. And that's what the rabbis call it, is this humility, this humbling that happens with what should have been his great day. And again, it gets back to this issue, which is the priests had such an important role to play for so long. The expectations are so high for them that there's no room, there's no margin for error. No margin for error. Every year when I read this portion, and oftentimes we read it and we talk about it, I have to give you my 2 cents on my own reflections on this portion, because it does remind me that you have to carry a sense of humility in religious leadership. That I know that I'm held to a different standard than other people. It definitely is it's something that affects my life. It's something that affects my family's lives. And it is a huge part of the consideration that I have, not just when I'm in synagogue, but wherever I am. To know that I'm a representative of Judaism, I'm a representative of God for people, I'm a representative of other rabbis, of history, and it's a huge responsibility. It's not something that I take lightly. I've said it before that if I ever did anything that embarrassed my position and my job, I'd step aside. I wouldn't. If the feeling from people, if the general consensus from people was that I had done something that had brought shame to the Jewish community or to the synagogue or to my family, I would not be fighting for or trying to argue against it, because the reality is unless it was something that I completely never did and was completely innocent of, I would say, look, even if I don't think it was as serious as other people did, if the general consensus was that this was serious enough, I'd step aside. And I will tell you, there are rabbis who haven't done that, and I disagree with them. I'm not going to say that they're not good people or good rabbis or whatever. They've made a mistake, but I do think that rabbis, especially within the realm, and again, it's usually personal behavior that involves infidelity and involves things that people do that are that maybe they would get a pass for if they had a different type of job, but I don't think in certain jobs they should be given a pass. So I feel that way, and I felt that way my whole life. So I would not fight that at all. And again, more importantly, I wouldn't engage in a behavior that would put me in that situation. I wouldn't do it if I thought I could get away with it and then say, well, if I do get away with it, then I'll deal with it then. So again, I think about this every time I read this Torah portion, is what is the responsibility of the priests and what's the responsibility of religious leaders today? So it's my little rant on that. And and I've told some of you this before, you've heard it in the class before, and it's my feeling. So again, doesn't mean that I wouldn't tell somebody if they had done something similar that they're a bad person or that they can't be forgiven or their spouse shouldn't forgive them. But when it comes to doing their job as a clergy person, not something that I'd recommend anybody ask for forgiveness for. I think you step aside, get a new job. It's my take on it. So when Aaron's family is now dealing with their loss, it says specifically, do not go outside the tent of meeting lest you die. For the Lord's anointing oil is upon you. And they did as Moses had bidden. So they're not even allowed in their grief to leave the area, the immediate area, after this happens. So it happens. The other brothers are there. Let's say grandchildren are there. Some of their children are there. Aaron is most importantly there. None of them are allowed to leave the precinct now. They're not allowed to leave yet. So they're not allowed to go accompany the body. They're not allowed to go outside with the body. That's what we read. And then God here does speak, Hal. This is where God actually speaks. And the Lord spoke to Aaron, saying, drink no wine or other intoxicant, you or your sons, when you enter the tent of meeting, that you may not die. This is a law for all time throughout the ages. For you must distinguish between the sacred and profane, and between the unclean and the clean. Vein kodesh uvein chol uvein hatameh uvein hatahor. So that is, and again, it continues, and you must teach the Israelites all the laws which the Lord has imparted to them through Moses. And then it's going to go on to some more about the sacrifice. So let's just look at these lines, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Well, let's look specifically, and the Lord spoke to Aaron, saying, and specifically, by the way, it says Aaron and not Moses and Aaron, or just Moses, just to Aaron. Do not drink any other wine or intoxicant, which in Hebrew is yain v'shechar. That is wine, yain, and intoxicant, meaning other kinds of alcohols. One may also add to that other types of pharmaceuticals.
Peyote.
You don't know. Yeah, we usually translate the word shikar as alcohol, intoxicant, right? Actually, that's the word we use for
Drunk.
alcoholic, right? We call it an alcoholic.
A shika.
Yeah, not yain, by the way, not wine. For some reason, I guess if you drink heavy alcohol, it is considered, that's your business. When you're getting down to business, when you're a real shikar, you're drinking intoxicants. But it could be, again, something else that alters your mind. And it says specifically why not. The punishment is pretty severe. It says you're going to die. And it says so that you can be able to distinguish, because you are the ones who have to do this. You do it for yourself, and you're teaching the Israelites what to do. So because of this, as Ronnie's already said, there's an interpretation that what Nadav and Avihu did was that they went into the temple drunk. They went into the tabernacle, the Holy of Holies. They went into that area drunk. Doesn't say it, but the juxtaposition of the two passages are what the rabbis are able to say. Why does God say this now? It's because of that. You could just as easily say God's saying it because he doesn't want them to screw up at all. Don't screw up. These guys did it when they weren't drunk. Think about how much worse it'll be if you're drunk. But the point is that there is this very high standard placed on them. I will tell you, this was an important law in the Torah, that the priests couldn't drink when they were engaged in their work. It doesn't say that they couldn't drink tomorrow or the day before. Well, I guess if they don't let it get too crazy, but
Except on Purim.
when they're drinking in the Holy of Holies. So let's focus on this for a second. This law about not drinking, and because it says because you must teach the laws of the Israelites, the rabbis, the inheritors of the tradition and of teaching the people, took from this that they weren't supposed to drink when they're doing their jobs either. Now, a lot of what rabbis used to do, not so much today, of course, but lots of what we used to do, I'll say we used to do a lot of we used to do a lot of judging. We used to do a lot of law. Where the rabbis really were lawyers and judges, not clergy, if you will. They were teachers, but they were also teachers of law. I mean, specifically, that's what they were teaching. They were teaching halakha. And so because they were like the priests in that way, and they saw themselves as priests, as inheritors of this, they said you can't drink when you're doing your job as a rabbi. Now, you jokingly said, but what about Purim? Well, one can make the argument, Purim, you're not rendering legal decisions. You're not supposed to on Purim. You're supposed to be celebrating and you're supposed to be drinking. I will tell you that Purim is about the only time that I drink ever in services or during services or when I do something.
Ask him.
What? Simchat Torah and Purim. What?
Simchas Torah too, no?
Simchas Torah and Purim. Yep. Now, this is a rule that I do take it seriously. I do not drink alcohol at Shabbat table before I go to services. My wife may have wine. I don't even drink wine in my Kiddush cup. I drink grape juice in my Kiddush cup. I mean, I do that for a few reasons. One, I am getting into a car and I am going to be driving. But there's this other issue, which is I do not want to have impaired in any kind of impairment when I'm doing services. I am liable to say something nuts even when I'm not drunk. So let alone when I've had something to drink. I do not want to have those inhibitions stripped away. So I do take it seriously. I do not drink at services. And the only time, again, that I drink is Purim. And most of the time at Purim, I am still functioning at a non-impaired level. There have been a few where I definitely went beyond my limit for what I would have been in the realm of complete control. But and last Purim was a month ago was definitely not one of those days. It should have been, by the way. If I had any idea what we'd be living with now, I would have gone crazy at Purim. And by the way, one of the reasons why so many people in the Orthodox world got sick was because Purim happened in the midst of the corona epidemic in Israel and in New York and New Jersey and in that area, and it devastated the Orthodox community. Devastated because of Purim. Purim killed people this year, unfortunately. I mean, they're not talking about it a lot because we're not talking about it a lot because it's so sad and it's so I mean, it's kind of a theological dilemma, but Purim was a devastation this year in the Orthodox world. Just horrible timing for where it was with the epidemic. So the Orthodox world has been disproportionately affected in England, in Belgium, in New York, New Jersey, and even in California to some extent, but not as bad, nowhere near as bad, mainly family members and people who came back from out of town, but really bad because of Purim this year. And it's partly because people were drinking out of the same cups, which we do, the same bottles at Purim, which we do sometimes. And the fact that our when you drink to excess, it hurts your immunity. I mean, it's about, if you want to hurt yourself physically a little bit, I mean, I guess you could hurt yourself a lot too, obviously. But yeah, I mean, you know, people who've drunk too much know the way they feel the next day. It's their bodies reacting to being poisoned and to some extent, being abused. Again, it's not that, if you do it once or twice a year that your body's necessarily gonna shut down. But in the middle of an pandemic, very, very bad timing. So It is what it is. I do want to tell you that there is a long tradition in Judaism of understanding that alcohol, any type of alcohol impairment when it comes to doing sacred tasks, is very, very serious. And rabbis and cantors are not supposed to be drunk when they're doing their jobs. They're not supposed to lead services intoxicated. They're not supposed to be giving sermons intoxicated. They're not supposed to be rendering decisions or doing bar mitzvahs and life cycles and doing those kinds of things with any type of impairment at all. And make the argument that, again, for people in the business of being a rabbi, a cantor, being a pastor, that having an alcohol problem is not, it's very, very hard to do your job effectively when you're battling an alcohol addiction. There are rabbis who've done it. There are rabbis who successfully, have kind of battled their addictions while they're functioning, but it's very hard to do. And oftentimes it doesn't end well. And oftentimes it leads to those other kinds of problems. But as we know about alcohol addiction, it's oftentimes an indicator of other issues that are going on. So this is, and it's oftentimes tied with some of these other problems. So this is a serious issue for kind of taking away a relevant lesson from this, which is that rabbis are not supposed to be doing their jobs with any type of impairment, which means, again, since you never know for sure when you're going to be called on, probably a good idea not to be drunk ever, because you never know when you're going to be called on to go to the hospital or to do something as a rabbi that you need to have your wits about you. So it's a serious issue. I mean, I can't tell somebody, sorry, I can't come over now, I'm really hungover. I didn't drink. I'm not drunk right now, but I'm impaired or I feel sick, because that wouldn't go over very well. So there is this understanding that that for us today, there is a takeaway. This isn't just for the priest. It's for anyone who's rendering these kinds of decisions and who's in a position of leadership. So again, this is one of the most powerful takeaways from this section. Anybody else have any comments or questions or any thoughts about this section?
Mark, I have a question though about, I hadn't thought about the Orthodox community being especially hit. I'm looking at something here. Is it true in Israel that it's 8 to 10 times more in the Orthodox community than the general population?
Yes.
Yeah, Meir Shireen was hit very hard.
Well, it's not just it was also Bnei Brak. Bnei Brak is closer to Tel Aviv. It's just east of Tel Aviv, and Bnei Brak was.
I'm looking at that.
Bnei Brak, the ultra-Orthodox community, they actually had to send police in, the Israeli police. Remember, they have national police in Israel. They don't have it's such a small country. They don't have states or city police. It's national police. So when the Israeli government says we're sending police in, it's like FBI or like if we had a national police. So they sent them into Bnei Brak and said, you cannot act like this is not happening. And so it was pretty serious. But it also, I mean, I spoke to several people within the Chabad community, and Crown Heights was devastated by Corona. Fortunately, again, the death rate has been low overall. It has been low. It's been very low in Israel. Israel has one of the lowest death rates of coronavirus of any country in the kind of the industrial world that have cases, because Israel's had cases. I mean, their cases, I'm telling you right now, Israel's cases they've had 12,500 cases as of today, which is, when you look at it per million population, Israel's had 1,400 cases per 1 million people, and the USA has 1,900 per 1 million people. That's pretty close. I mean, Spain is at 3,800, is twice as high. Italy's been at 2,700. So some countries have been really, really high. Israel has been on the higher end of cases, or, you know, kind of the mid to high range of cases, if you will. But as far as deaths, they've only had 130 deaths. So Israel has had only 15 deaths per million population, whereas US has had 86 deaths per million population. So per capita, Israel's had a lot fewer deaths per capita than the other countries that have had it. Right now, the deaths per million overall in the world is about 17 per million, and Israel is just under the world's rate of death per getting it, if you will. So it's really important to know that Israel has done a really good job fighting it once the people have had it, which is kind of a credit to their medical system and to their aggressive way of treating it. Really aggressive, very professional, very very safe of, you know, in the way that they've handled it. I mean, just to give you an example, Spain, they've had 402 deaths per million. I mean, that's over 4 times higher than the United States. It's higher even than Italy. And Israel, again, has had 15 deaths per million. So it's really, really a testament to, I mean, even Sweden, which is, you know, pretty industrial, pretty modern country, 119 deaths per million in Sweden. And in those countries, I mean, Netherlands is 183 deaths per million. So you know, just kind of keep that in mind as we're talking about Corona moving forward and what it means in other countries. But Belgium, for example, which has a very large ultra-Orthodox community in Antwerp, the Diamond Center in Antwerp, they've had, again, 383 deaths per million population. They've had a total caseload of 2,900 per million, which is almost twice as high as the USA. And that's it's had a huge rip through the Orthodox community in Belgium, the ultra-Orthodox community in Antwerp. So again, you know, that is a relevant discussion about Israel and how it deals with, if you will, right in front of us, between the holy, the sacred and the profane, between the unclean and clean. We're going to read next week in Tazria about how the priests had to decide who was clean and who wasn't clean. I mean, if you want to talk about what people are, I mean, I'm not going to give away any secrets, but every rabbi, every synagogue is going to be talking about Tazria and Metzora and those portions about quarantining, about how we treat people who are infectious. I mean, you want to talk about reading a portion that speaks to us? Next week, that's Tazria and Metzora, which it hasn't spoken to us with this much power since 20 years ago, since we were in the height of the AIDS epidemic in our country. It's not spoken to us in such a powerful way as it will this year when we read Tazria and Metzora. So, but back to Shemini, back to the death and to the repercussions, and the fact that the priests are not supposed to drink. So again, maybe Nadav and Avihu, who offered up the wrong sacrifice, the wrong offering, because they were drunk, because they were under the influence, if you will. Again, not necessarily the most obvious reading, but when you read it all together, you know, that's a possibility. Anybody else have any comments before we move on?
I have a question.
Yeah.
This seems like almost a setup for the Korach narrative, in the sense that they came with their fire pans and they were smitten by the Lord.
There definitely are.
Maybe there's a warning.
There is a foreshadow here. There's a foreshadow. Again, the fire pans, the incense, the fact that it's all it takes, you know, you don't have to have sacrifices. You don't have to have anything. You don't have to have blood. You don't have to have the drama of the sacrifices. But yeah, there definitely is some foreshadowing here to Korach, which we'll read in a couple months, a month and a half or so. We'll be reading Korach in June. June. Where will we be in June? Anyways, who knows?
We'll be able to get this at home in New
Where
York.
will he be in June? It's actually the end of May this year. We'll be reading Korach.
Yeah, but class.
But yeah, it is very, very, it's very, very similar. There is that sense of foreshadow. Anybody else before we move on? Because we do want to get to another important part of this portion before we take leave of this week's Parsha. Anybody else? Interestingly, it says just in the next paragraph, Moses spoke to Aaron and to his remaining sons Eleazar and Itamar, take the meal offering that is left over from the Lord's offerings by fire and eat it unleavened matzot. It says right there, eat matzot, and eat it unleavened beside the altar, for it is most holy. You shall eat it in the sacred precinct, and as much as is your due and that of your children from the Lord's offerings by fire, for so I've been commanded. But the breast elevation offering and thigh gift, your sons and daughters may eat in any clean place, for they've been assigned to you as due. So you're allowed to eat those outside of the inside temple area. Okay? But here we go. I'll just kind of finish with this. But it says, then Moses inquired about the goat offering, as it had already been burned. He was angry with Eleazar and Itamar, Aaron's remaining sons, and said, why did you not eat the sin offering in the sacred area? For it is most holy, and he has given it to you to remove guilt of the community and to make expiation for them before the Lord. So it says here that Moses was angry. It says he was angry, but again, it seems by the context that it's Moses that was angry. And he again seems to be angry at the two remaining sons for not doing the right thing by eating not the way that they should eat. And here's the interesting thing here. Aaron says to Moses, see, this day they brought their sin offering and their burnt offering before the Lord, and such things have befallen me. Had I eaten the sin offering today, would the Lord have approved? And so Aaron actually challenges his brother here and says, I didn't think today was appropriate day for me to eat these things.
And Aaron wins the argument.
Well, I didn't get to that, but yes. And when Moses heard this, he approved. So Aaron challenges Moses's ruling. He says, Moses, that doesn't make sense. Today of all days, this was not the day to celebrate. This was not the day to eat these things. Something horrible happened here. And again, even if this is the way we're supposed to do it on like the best case or a normal case, it doesn't apply today. And again, Moses has to say, yeah, you're right. And it says, Vayitev Ba'inav, that God, God may have commanded it, but Moses felt in his heart, Aaron had a good decision. It doesn't say what God says here in the text, but there seems to be this understanding that Moses has given, or God has given Aaron the responsibility to make these decisions, and he's decided something. He's making a decision.
Is this the first example of pilpul?
Is it an explanation of? Is it an example of pilpul? It is an interesting discussion because yes, is it a discussion or in the Talmudic pilpul formula where somebody says something and somebody challenges the ruling and then they go back and forth. Interestingly, I think this is more of an explanation of what a priest is supposed to do, which is decide whether something is fit for eating, for sacrificing. Is the person fit to come into the community? The priests have to make evaluations of the situation. And so even if there's laws, the laws can't apply to everything in the same way. So I don't know if it's so much pilpul as it is they're now rendering the verdict of having to do what they are supposed to do, which is say whether something's clean or unclean, say if something's fit, say if something's holy, say if in this case we can do this. So it is really, really powerful that that this is what, this is what Aaron does. Aaron has just suffered a tremendous loss, but he's at work. He does his job. He renders a decision, and he actually challenges Moses to make the decision. He doesn't just make a decision, he has to override Moses. And I think it's powerful that Moses agrees with it. Moses doesn't go back to God and say, well, God, what do you think? Moses now has given Aaron this authority, and he's okay with it. He's okay with it. He realizes that he has to go with the division of power. So it's very powerful. It's a very powerful mini scene that is part of this scene as well. Anything else? Well, let's move on then. Chapter 11. Because then it says, Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe vel Aharon. God spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying to them, speak to the Israelite people thus. These are the creatures that you may eat from among all the land animals. What do you know where we're going to go here?
Kosher.
We are going to have the first of two places in the Torah where we get a list of what's kosher and what's not kosher. And what's kosher and what's not kosher are animals. If you're a vegetarian,
No
you
problemo.
are permanently in a state of kashrut. I mean, you are. Everything comes down to eating animals. Let's read. The first definition or the first delineation is animals that live on the land. Animals are not broken and separated by species. They are not separated by physiology. They are described by their physiology, but they're not separated by physiology. They are separated and differentiated by where they live. What realm do they live in? Which goes back to this biblical explanation at the beginning of the world. How God created and populated the earth and the world, not just the land of the earth, but our planet. Because God has animals in the waters, animals in the sky, and then animals on the land. Here we have it in reverse. We have the animals first that live in the land. And again, those are realms. The cosmos is divided into three: air, land, and sea. So here we're going to start in the middle with the land. And what are they? Again, specifically animals that you can eat are animals that have true hoofs, with clefts through their hoofs, and that chew their cud. Two things. They have to have two things: split hoof and chew their cud. The definition of an animal that's kosher is not one that tastes good. It is not in the law. It is animals that have those two things. It does not say why in the Torah. There is not an explanation. There is not a description of why those animals are healthier to eat than not healthier. There's thoughts that those are what's behind this, that these types of animals are lower on the food chain, that they're not animals that eat other animals. They don't. They can't. If they chew their cud, if they're ruminants, they can't by nature eat other animals. I mean, they could accidentally, but they don't normally eat other animals. They can't redigest that. So these are animals that are vegetarians themselves. Split hoof, we don't know. Some people say it has to do with what is taboo, animals that were taboo in certain cultures. Many cultures have animals that are taboo. Were there animals that were taboo in the Middle East? Yes. Were there animals that were taboo to the Jewish people? Maybe. It doesn't say that they're taboo. But is this giving us kind of a, in a roundabout way, what was taboo? That pigs were taboo? Maybe. We don't know. It doesn't say. That's the those are the anthropologists trying to explain it. The Torah doesn't tell us. It simply says that that's what you can eat. The following, however, those who either chew cud or have true hooves, you shall not eat. The camel chews its cud, but it doesn't have a true hoof. It is unclean for you. The daman, although it chews its cud and has no true hooves, although it chews its cud, it has no true hooves, and it is unclean for you. What is daman? Anybody?
Giraffe?
Good
No.
guess. Interestingly enough, it is somewhat related to a giraffe. Anybody? These are
Llama?
translations. These are translations that, again, these are what we think they are based on the words, how they're used in Arabic and Aramaic. This is the hyrax, which is
Here.
usually a vegetarian type animal, but they can eat anything. And they're actually they're all over Israel now. They've kind of been reintroduced. They kind of look like really big rats, but they're actually related. Hyraxes are related to elephants.
To what?
Elephants.
Oh my.
Now again, it has to do with some of their morphology and how they were
Elephants have toes.
but they're sometimes called rock rabbits. They're not really rabbits, but they kind of look a little bit like a rodent. Sometimes they're called conies, but you see them all over Israel today, and they're called a shafan in Hebrew, and so they're everywhere. And so that would kind of maybe be a good explanation for why why they're told that they're not good to eat, because again they don't have hooves. The hare is then the next one that's mentioned.
Ooh, scary looking.
They cannot have a. They cannot have. Oh yeah, that's right. Why don't I show you a picture of a hyrax?
Ooh, scary dude.
A hyrax. You're going to see a picture of
Spell that.
You're going to see a hyrax picture. Yeah, that's a good thing about being on the internet right now.
All right.
This is kind of a cute hyrax.
Yeah, that's like
This is a cuter
a
hyrax.
meerkat.
How is that spelled, Mark?
Hyrax.
Oh, I see it.
They're really cool because they kind of they almost are always, you see them with their families, so they're kind of like, they look like really friendly animals, but I'm sure that they're, I'm sure they carry diseases and other stuff too that make them not so nice. But anyway, that's the hyrax. But they're plentiful, which is why you got to tell people not to eat them because they're everywhere. Sometimes like the hare, like the hare, which you can find everywhere. And here we get to the swine, the chazir, which again, such a popular, important word that we even have it in Yiddish, chazer, which is
Somebody who eats a lot.
somebody who is a pig, a glutton, is called a chazer. It's not something you want to be. And it has true hoofs, but it does not chew its cud. And of course, it's an omnivore. It eats everything. And by the way, from what we know about the pig, it's very close in a lot of ways to human beings, right?
Right, the closest.
That's
right.
why we can cut them open and we can look at their we can look inside. But we also can use them for, as we know,
Heart valves.
Yep.
Heart valves are almost exclusively now pig valves.
Yep. So they do really well for us as we integrate them into and of course they are kosher to be used for that because you're saving a life and you're allowed to use that for the value of saving a life goes over the consideration of kashrut. We also, of course, use them a lot for biomedical research and for drug testing and for learning what is going to hurt us, because I can only imagine how many pigs are right now dying in corona tests. But we use them for that because they're so close to us. Maybe that's one of the reasons, again, why they're not kosher. We also know, by the way, they're quite smart. They actually, for people who keep them who've domesticated them, they will tell you they make great pets. Not exactly what I want to have around the house, but people who have them love them. They swear by them, if you will. I'm supposed to really
Very smart.
swear by a pig. It says, you shall not eat of their flesh or touch their carcasses. They're unclean for you. You're not supposed to be using them, by the way, then for in a best case scenario, you're not supposed to be using their bodies in any way, even their carcasses, even if you're not eating them. But again, it is overriding value of saving a life. So it's going in our bodies, but it's different. It's at such a higher level because it's saving our lives that we're allowed to use it. That's it for the animals. So basically it gives us two rules, and then it tells us about some particular animals that are very common animals that you need to be really careful of, because they're animals that you're going to encounter in your life, and you need to know you're not supposed to be eating them. A lot of animals we're not supposed to be eating then, but it doesn't give us animals that we're not going to usually come in contact with to tell us, because it's told us what we have to know as far as what's kosher for land animals. That's it. Then it gets into the water. Let's go into the water. These shall you eat of that live in the water. Anything in the water, whether in the seas or the streams, that has fins and scales, these you may eat. Two things, fins and scales. Again, just like land animals, two things. But anything in the seas or in the streams that has no fins and scales, among the swarming things of the water and among all the other living things that are in the water, they are an abomination for you. And an abomination for you they shall remain. You shall not eat of their flesh, and you shall abominate their carcasses. So fish, pretty simple. And here, you get everything in the water that has no fins or scales shall be an abomination. Repeats it again. That's it for the fish. That's it. No specific animals in the water you're not allowed to eat. The rabbis kind of give you the Torah gives you a very brief overview of what decides whether a fish is kosher. The rabbis basically comment on it from the standpoint of these are animals, generally speaking, that again, and fish with fins and scales can eat other fish, but generally speaking, they eat plankton and they are feeding off of the lowest level of animal life or living life, phytoplankton that's in the waters. The other animals that don't have fins and scales are oftentimes the predatory animals, predatory fish in this case, and also the ones that are the bottom feeders. Now, it doesn't say in the Torah you don't eat lobster and shrimp and crab because they're bottom feeders and because they eat anything and because they eat carcasses and things that seem kind of gross to eat. It doesn't say that, but it could be part of the issue. And again, it seems to go along with this idea of not eating things that are too high up on the food chain. Because remember, you're eating everything that they're eating all the way down the line. And so the way to again, minimize that is to eat the lower level of living thing, or just eat the vegetation. That's it. I don't know what else to tell people. Those of you who really love the taste of shrimp and lobster. Why isn't it kosher? Why is bacon not kosher? I don't know what to tell you. When it comes to birds, people generally are okay with the birds that are kosher. There are not a lot of people, so we're going to see what is limited in birds. There's not a lot of people that say, oh gosh, I really wish I could eat a eagle.
Penguin.
I don't really want to eat a, I can't think of anything that is on the list of not kosher in the air that I really have had a craving for. One of the things that's on that list, my friends, bats, not kosher. We're about to see it. Never had a craving for bat. And guess what? Maybe those people, and I don't want to be judgmental, but maybe those people eating bats should stop eating bat. I'm just saying. Maybe it's time to give up bat. And by the way, do we have the power to enforce that? Yes, we do. Because we can tell people that if you continue to run wet markets, we will not be buying from your other markets. You want to keep wet markets open, we won't use your other markets. So I think it's fair to say that for the diseases that have been spread in the last couple of years, 20 years or so, 2 decades now, that have come out of those wet markets, it's about time for them to think about what's happening and what the consequences are on a global scale for those kinds of things. Again, I'm not going to rant about it anymore. I'm not going to talk about even where it comes from. You all know where it comes from, and I don't need to repeat it. But I will tell you, it is never had a hankering for it, and even if I did, kashrut, the laws of kashrut would have kept me healthy and would have kept those people healthy too. So let's take a look. The following you shall abominate among the birds. They shall not be eaten. They are an abomination. And again, that's the word that's used, abomination. It's not, doesn't say they're death, they're this, they're that. It is they're an abomination, which is the word that we use in several places. And some people have pointed out that it's the same word that's used for what? Where else?
Predator?
Abomination, what? Where else do we use the word in the Torah for abomination?
Oh, I don't know about the Torah.
No, anybody? Anybody? Hello? Toeva? Nobody? It's the same words we use when we talk about cross-dressing, homosexuality. It's toeva. Honestly, it's the same word. So I do want to point out there that people who are railing against the toeva of other things in the Bible need to understand that it's the same word used here for unclean animals.
I thought these birds were chosen because they're predators.
I haven't got to that yet. You're absolutely
I'm sorry.
right. No, but you're absolutely right. No, you're right. These are birds that are predatory. But we have to spell them out. The eagle, the vulture, the black vulture, the kite, the falcon of every variety, and the raven. The ostrich, the nighthawk, the seagull, hawks of every variety, the little owl, the cormorant, the great owl, the white owl, the pelican, and the bustard. The stork, herons of every variety, the hoopoe, and the bat. Now, we just went through a whole list of birds, and then we had the bat. Again, it's because they don't care whether it's a species, it's a mammal, but it flies. And the differentiation here is where the animal lives, where the flying thing lives. If it's flying, it's in the sky. It's normally flying around. And so when we see it, we look at it, it's flying, it's up in the sky, not kosher. Why? Because again, some people would say bats eat other kinds of things that are, and a lot of bats are herbivores, but there are other bats, especially those really scary vampire bats, that eat other things and drink other stuff, including the blood of living animals, which would really be bad. That's the laws for birds. And so we don't have distinctions like we had the other ones with 2 things that you're not supposed to have, or supposed to have, or whatever, 2 things that you must have, I should say. Here we have to have literally a list of what's okay and what's not okay. Because again, all of these animals, as Phyllis has said, these are all predatory birds, or they're carrion birds. They're birds that eat flesh of carcasses. And this is where we kind of really get this clarity that what we're eating here are animals, the animals we're allowed to eat, the ones the Torah says we can eat, are animals that are lower on the food chain, that don't eat other animals. I will give you my take on this, which is that if I could go back in time and explain to my ancestors how to stay alive, knowing that they're going to eat anything they see in front of them. Why? Because people have done that for a long time. Ever since they started moving out of the caves and started coming into contact with lots of different animals, animals that they maybe never saw before, animals that have migrated, or they've migrated to a new area, humans, where they're coming into contact with new species. How do you keep people alive? Well, you basically tell them, if you're going to eat an animal, don't eat an animal that's eating another animal. And these laws help protect people from dying from what they eat. There's no better way to help save lives through diet than by giving these instructions. I'm telling you, it's amazing when you think about it from that, on that level, that these laws literally, and again, what would you have to tell the people? Well, God told you. God told you this is what you need to do, because otherwise they never would understand it. Yeah, Philip.
Yeah, this is the first time, thank you, that the kosher laws have made any sense to me. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. I will
little
tell you,
late.
by the way,
Little
for us today, we can make sense of it. But yeah, please finish. Sorry.
But there was a very, just off topic a little bit, but on topic.
Sure.
There was a story in today's Wall Street Journal that the San Francisco 49ers losing the Super Bowl probably saved thousands of lives in the Bay Area, because there was no parade and coronavirus was already in San Francisco in February.
Interesting. Wow, that is an interesting. That's an intro. Yeah, I'm seeing it right now. I did not know that. That is, I have to read that story.
It's
Wow.
a fascinating story about just pure luck, and how a doctor in San Francisco, there was already a coronavirus team put together, and they now realize what would have happened in the Bay Area would have been what happened in New Orleans.
Wow, that is an interesting, weird, say, you're right, how you save people. But I think, I thought you were going to tell me about the Jacksonville Jaguars a couple seasons ago a bunch of their team became vegan, and they ended up doing really well. It's in a Netflix special about, I can't remember what it's called. And it was a Netflix special about a MMA fighter that goes vegan. And it was about how you can still be vegan. And it's called The Game Changers. And it's a really good doc, by the way, too. It's very well done. It kind of deals with how pro athletes can also become vegan and not worry about this. Look, I mean, the reality is we do now have the ability to test food. We test food very well, by the way. Other countries don't test food as well as we do. I mean, again, people are going to say, well, we don't always test it great and whatever. We are still very careful about the food we eat. Some of you saw that one of the largest meat suppliers, one of the largest pork suppliers, Smithfield, got shut down. They got shut down. And that, by the way, destroys the whole supply chain. Tracy's company.
Tyson's too.
This is going to, I don't know what kind of effect it's going to have on the supplies, but for her company, it's going to definitely, even though they don't have a agreement with Smithfield, it's going to affect everybody. And again, Tyson's, and there was another one today that got one in South Dakota. It was a, so it was, so- was this
Yeah,
was
these are all in South Dakota.
Smithfield too. Yeah, so it's really really bad. In the pork processing place in Smithfield, it was over 500 employees that came down with this. Listen,
Now it's over 6.
we have really good, really strong abilities to test workers. In not just for corona, maybe we do better with other tests, by the way, but we test workers frequently. But it's still a hit and miss proposition, and other countries are nowhere near as good as we are in testing meat and testing workers. And it really is a risk. And I will tell you, when you see what's been happening, I will tell you a relevant lesson from it today. If you and I know that this is about the closest we've ever come to looking at apocalypse and looking at dystopian futures. This is the closest we've gotten to Mad Max ever in our lives. We know that we know because we know what you can get sick from if you eat bad meat. We know this. Our ancestors didn't fully understand how much. I mean, they knew you could get sick from eating. They knew that, but they didn't understand why. And so the laws of kashrut kept people alive. And going forward, one of the reasons why I would say we got to keep reading this is, God forbid we come back to a time when things are not as we're living in Mad Max days. People who are not eating meat the same way, if they forget, we have microscopes. Our ancestors didn't have microscopes. God forbid our descendants won't have microscopes. This is the only way you could keep people alive. I mean, I really do believe that. I mean, partly it's because I like science fiction and I like to imagine time, and I like to imagine, what my life would have been like thousands of years ago and what my life would be like thousands of years from now. I imagine those kind of things. But when I read this, I'm like, yeah, this is really important because it would save lives. It literally would keep people alive if they follow these rules. So it is something to think about. It is hyper relevant now because, again, I mean, I'm sitting here looking at the word bat, and we know how people got sick right now. You wonder if somebody hadn't been selling dead bat, whether we'd all be upside down right now. There are consequences to the food we eat, and today, more than ever, these are issues. And I talked about it years ago when I did a sermon about kashrut. I talked about the environmental impact of kashrut, of what it would be if we could give up, and vegetarianism in particular. It tries to make it harder for us to create these bad situations. And there are kosher food suppliers, meat processors, who violated this. That's what actually made me do that sermon, was what had happened in our own recent memory with agri-processors. That was my launching point for the sermon, was that even kosher suppliers had forgotten what the essence of kashrut was, is to keep us alive and to not let us get sick. And the fact that the environmental impact of our meat processing today is killing us. It's literally killing us. It's killing the environment. And meat markets are killing us because they're spreading disease quickly. So this is the reality of what we're dealing with right now. Our laws we're there to help us, and we're going against them to some extent with the way we're processing meat today. And now it has global implications. It's not just that one community gets sick with some bad meat. This is now, we see what happens today. So again, that's my rant for the day, but I have—
Mark, how does the issue of salting kosher meat figure in?
Well, it definitely gets rid of the blood. It's difficult to say, and some people have made the argument that it also, because it works it has antiseptic power, quality, the salt, that it cleans it of some germs. I want to make it very clear: salting does not rid animal flesh of all disease. It doesn't, but it may do a little bit. Of the work. It does. Just having the salt on the surfaces, by the way, reduces some of the bacteria. So it does actually help, but it was primarily, it seems to be the intention was to rid the meat of the blood itself, which again, you cut down the chance of pathogens when you drain it of blood to begin with. It doesn't make it pure. I want to make it very clear. You're not going to get no levels of disease if you've properly salted the meat. But because again, you can salt the meat and then it can become infected after it's already been on display. It can be warmed, and then it gets it can go bad. I don't want to get, it's disgusting, quite frankly.
Can we eat the internal organs of kosher animals?
Interesting questions, because the Torah doesn't here speak about that. It did speak about it in the description of what is burned up, but there does seem to be quite a lot of the animal that would have been kosher, except for parts that come around the hindquarters of the animal, that are around the sciatic nerve, which we read because of what happens with Jacob, and this idea of not having meat that comes into contact with that, reminiscent of that. Again, that's the only reason the Torah gives us. It doesn't tell us, that's why, it's because it's a healthier part of the meat. It doesn't say that. There are
Liver is kosher.
Yep, there are parts. I was just going to say there are parts of the
Breads.
Yeah, so the parts of the animal that are not kosher from a cow are some of the, I'm not a cow eater, but some of the non-kosher flanks that are not kosher are some of the tastier portions of a cow. So I will tell you that there are parts of a cow that are not kosher to eat that people enjoy eating, and they don't.
Porterhouse and T-bone.
Yes. And those are cuts that are very popular. Very popular. So again, when you think about what's not kosher on a cow, it is, there are larger chunks of the cow that are not kosher. It's not so much the case, obviously, with the chicken, because basically any part of the chicken you can eat. Once it's killed, you can have any part of it you want. But again, you can't have those kinds of strips that are, again, sometimes the most enjoyable parts of the cow for those who eat cow. But pretty much, I'll tell you, I mean, the flank steak is not kosher. Shank from the rear shank isn't kosher. The round tenderloin. There's a lot of cow that you can't eat that is good part. Look, if you ask Jews what they like, they'll say, we like the ribs, we like brisket, we like parts of the cow that we've been eating. But that's because like half a cow isn't kosher. I mean, it's not a little piece of the cow that you're not allowed to eat. So it's a pretty good chunk of the cow that you can't have. But you can have, as Phyllis has just reminded us, you can have other parts that some people would think are not really nice to eat. You can have tongue. You can have other parts of the front part. Let me say it in the least disgusting way, which includes the head, that you can have that are kosher, because it's essentially the rear part that's not kosher. So, and of course there are things like kishka, which was never my favorite thing to even think about. And there is, by the way, vegan kishka you can have. You can have that, which again are parts of the animal that are kosher, even though they're not cuts of tissue, if you will.
I heard that if the sciatic nerve is cut out, that you can eat the back part as long as the sciatic nerve is dissected.
I will tell you, there are people who've ruled that you can have other parts of the cow, but because that's not the normal plate and that's not a normal situation, you're not supposed to do that. If somebody says that they have a kosher cut, it's difficult to say. It's also very hard, Phyllis, and again, I can't even believe I'm having this discussion as a vegetarian, it is very hard to remove the sciatic from the animal. One would also say it's virtually impossible. I will
Is
say,
the
I
same
will
thing
say,
true with like deer meat? You can only eat from the front half of the deer?
yes, yes, yes. And deer is kosher, venison is kosher. The reason that it's not usually eaten is because it's usually not killed in a kosher way. But if it's slaughtered with a shecht, with a cut on the jugular vein, it is kosher. By the way, this is what we were going to talk about during this time. I just don't know what details we're going to get into. And I will tell you that, again, there is a real question of whether or not lab-grown flesh of a non-kosher animal will one day be kosher. Or for that matter, lab-grown flesh from a, I guess you could argue, you really wouldn't know maybe, but from the hind quarter of a cow. So let's say filet mignon, which isn't kosher normally, which again, as Phyllis said, if you can find somebody who says it's kosher, again, it's not my problem. But if you really wanted to have kosher filet, there are companies that are trying to take out the sciatic and make it so that there's no problem. It's very expensive, and people have not been able to do this on a mass scale. And I don't know if it'll ever be done. Mass producing flesh bioengineering also has not been able to be done on a mass scale. Will it be kosher? Some authorities have already said theoretically it will be kosher, which means that there might be a pork flesh that can one day be kosher because it didn't actually come from you didn't actually eat from a pig. My guess is that most people will be hesitant to eat it because you're not supposed to consume a pig whether you killed it or not. But we'll have to see. I don't know what will happen with. And then there's a question: will vegetarians like myself, will they be comfortable eating flesh from an animal that wasn't killed? Again, we're talking about taking cells, grafting cells together, and creating flesh off of a pseudo. Using real cells, but not cells that necessarily came from an animal that was slaughtered.
What about how kosher animals were fed, either grass-fed or grain-fed? Is there an issue with that?
Hell, unfortunately, there's not. And the animals in an agri-processor's plant in Iowa were treated horribly, and that was part of the problem, was that the facility was shut down by the government because of its use of illegal immigrants and also of its unsanitary and unclean practice. So was really a big problem, and it was since taken over, and they're not dealing with the same thing. I don't know what to tell you other than there are too many stories of kosher food not being treated, kosher meat, the kosher animals not being treated well, and the meat after it has been processed not being treated well. When I ate kosher meat, when I was keeping kosher with eating meat that was only, before I was a vegetarian, let's put it that way. I was not happy with the quality of the meat, and I was not always eating kosher meat. So as a kid, I didn't always have kosher meat. I knew what good meat looked like, and I knew what bad meat looked like. And I really did feel that from some of the kosher butchers, stores, that their attitude was, you should be grateful for us running our business, and we're going to give you anything we want to give you, and you should be glad about it. And I didn't like their customer service, and I didn't like their attitude about their food, and I didn't trust it, quite frankly, because I really didn't like I didn't feel that they had an attitude with the food that I could trust. So I have to say, I wish I could say that this was not an issue. Still for people, it is. And there are Jewish organizations, Jewish groups that have tried to have what they call an ethical kashrut, which is a promise to uphold ethical treatment of the animals and ethical treatment of the workers. and this is something that a lot of people take seriously now, but it has not spread within the majority of the people who eat kosher meat. Marina, as hopefully you see, also has said she does not want to eat a bat ever, and I applaud you, Marina, for not having a bat. She also had she's had 4 pet octopi, and she was very happy with their intelligence and their life as a pet.
So, Rabbi,
Yes.
yeah, Philip. So we're dealing with real animals, and real fish and real birds. So we have 3D printing. So it's sometime in the future, and the future you has a replicator, and the
Yeah.
replicator produces, like Star Trek, and the replicator, because that will happen.
Yeah.
We're already starting it. You can
Yeah.
actually 3D print chocolate right now. You
Yeah.
can 3D make candy.
Yeah, that's what I said. We're gonna bioengineer meat. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you do a replicated lobster, it's not lobster.
Yeah.
Okay. Can I eat it?
I would, it's going to be an interesting question because I'm eating meat all the time. I love Beyond Burgers. I love Impossible. I really like Beyond better. I should, by the way, with full disclosure, say I'm a stockholder in Beyond Meat, but I really do like the product. I think it's a good buy right now, by the way. I'm not going to give a Jim Cramer recommendation for Beyond Meat right now, but because it's been
my
up,
rabbi's my stockbroker.
it's been up to 180, and it's now right now today I track it every day. It's at 74.70. It went down to a low in the last month. It hit a low of about 54 back in March 18th. So it's gone up a little bit, but I think it's a great company. I think they're making a good product. They're going to keep coming out with new products, and we're eating fake stuff. I mean, that's the point. Is we're eating replicated. We're doing it like that now.
But Mark, the Beyond Meat is great. We had that for dinner tonight, but there's too much sodium in there.
Well,
there's probably more sodium in there than it is in a regular burger.
Yeah, no, there's no question. Well, depends on how you salt your food and what you do with it. But yes, apples to apples. You're taking a piece of ground meat and a Beyond burger. You're absolutely right. The sodium level's higher. I would love to see a better level to the sodium. I think that from what I understand, it's something that they're working on. But I do think that when you think about what you think about all the other problems with the meat, including the possibilities of so much, it's so much easier to get sick. I'm not talking about the environmental impact of having cows and all those other things which I didn't talk about. All those things, I think that it's still a better option. And again, I'm not a doctor, but I do think that they're going to get better at it. At solving the sodium issue. I really do hope. Maybe they can't. I mean, maybe this is the best. I know they know it's a problem. I think that there's a question again of what's the net effect of it, and I think that overall the salt is a problem, but the cholesterol, the foodborne illness on meat, besides E. coli, there's so many other easy stuff that people get off of their animal meat that's going to hurt them. And again, our stomachs are not designed to eat the amount of meat that we eat. I mean, they're just not. If we had a true carnivore stomach, we wouldn't have a large intestine. It just isn't. Our bodies aren't designed for it. Our teeth allow us to eat anything, but if we were true carnivores, we'd have incisors. Our teeth we'd be more like wolves. Our bodies, however you want to look at it, if you don't believe that God created us this way, our evolution didn't create us this way to eat the amount of animals. We've never eaten more animals than we have in our last few generations of humanity. It just never happened. We couldn't afford to eat the meat that we have today. So again, this is kind of where we're, and again, I didn't necessarily want to talk only about the vegetarian aspects of this, because I really do believe there's a health aspect to it, which we think about too. I just want to point out one thing before we wrap up. You're not supposed to eat bugs either, with the exception, and we've talked about it before, of locusts. You may eat locusts.
Chocolate covered.
Chocolate covered locusts. There are kosher versions of this, but it's not all kinds of locusts, because there are some forms of grasshoppers and locusts that were decided not kosher. Generally speaking, they're not ones you're going to find, but I will tell you, you got to be careful. You may want to err on the side of just not eating bugs, but if you really are craving some locusts, there are kosher locusts. They are a source of protein, and there are people who will tell you that there are worse things to eat. You know, I've never had them. So does anyone who's ever had them want to chime in right now before we finish?
I had one. I was in Ecuador for Passover one year, and I wasn't able to read the box because I didn't speak Spanish. And they offered them, and I ate one, and it was crunchy, and I was fine with it. Then they told me what it was, and I didn't have any more.
Okay, well, but you lived, and you didn't have any ill effects.
No.
Again, animals we're not supposed to eat. Paws, your kitten, your dogs are all not supposed to be eaten. You're not even supposed to come in contact with their carcasses. You're supposed to leave them alone. You're not supposed to eat moles, mice, lizards, geckos, crocodiles, lizards, all of those swarming things, any of those kinds of things. You're supposed to keep them away from you. Again, why? Because these animals probably also carried lots of disease with them. It does not say that, but we do know that if you eat that, you're going to probably increase your chance of getting sick. You're not supposed to come into contact with the carcasses of any of them. Don't use them. Don't use any of the dishes or any of the bowls or any of the vases or vessels that come into contact with them. You got to destroy them. But a spring or cistern, again, you don't have to destroy it, but you're unclean until you actually go through and cleanse yourself off of it. You couldn't destroy a well, but you can destroy the water jug or the carrier that you take the water out of, but you weren't supposed to destroy a well. And let's just finish up with one last thing.
Where did the separation of silverware and dishes come in? You know, like a meat set and a dairy set.
That comes from a part that we read in the Torah, not to boil a kid in its mother's milk. And from that, we don't even mix milk and meat on a plate together. But it's not from this. But it does say right here, I, the Lord, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God, you shall be holy, for I am holy. And this is the first place we have this. We have it many places in Leviticus. V'hitem kadoshim ki kadosh ani. Be holy, for I am holy. We are supposed to go forward and be holy. And this is for the priests, and it's also for everybody else. Every other person, not just the priests, are supposed to be in a state of holiness. Again, you know, we don't always get there, but we always have a way of getting back. And so we could go through if we're unclean, we can cleanse ourselves and we can go back. And this is, again, this is the lesson for the rest of Leviticus. How do you stay holy? How do you keep holy? And again, this is the last words of the portion. For distinguishing between the unclean and clean, between the living things that may be eaten and the living things that may not be eaten. This is what the priests do, and now to some extent, every one of us does. Because God gave us these laws through the priests, but for each one of us to keep. So with that, I want to wish everybody a healthy rest of the week. Stay healthy, stay holy, stay positive, and also join us Friday night for services. We're going to have some different music. We're adding to the melodies that you're going to hear Friday night. And I also want to tell you, we are going to have some very important and very cool offerings during the coming days. The Omer is a time for counting and making our lives count. Most importantly, we're going to have 2 holidays of the modern nature, of the modern type, the variety. That is we have Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Remembrance, coming up next week, next Tuesday. And so we're going to have a special online event for Yom HaShoah. We're working on that now. I'll let everybody know about it, but we're going to have something very special for Yom HaShoah, and that's going to be on, that'll be a week from, well, basically about just under a week from today. It'll be on the 21st. We'll be having an event on the 21st that evening, close to the end of the day on the 21st for Yom HaShoah. And the following week, so that'll be 2 weeks from now, we're going to have a special event for Yom HaTzmaut, for the Israel celebration, Israel's Day of Independence. We're going to have a celebration that day too, online for Yom HaTzmaut. So during the Omer period, we have those two holidays that come before Shavuot. So we'll have a chance to celebrate with those.
Rabbi, the 21st is next week.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yom HaShoah is next week. Yom HaTzmaut is the week after. So we have 2 weeks in a row where we will have online events. So the 21st is Tuesday night. The following week on the 28th, we're going to have an event for Yom HaTzmaut, Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaTzmaut. So the next 2 Tuesdays, not Wednesdays, the next Wednesdays we'll have class as normal. Wednesday the 22nd and Wednesday the 29th, I say as normal, online. So again, everybody stay
Quick
well.
question, if I may, about Shabbat services. So some shuls, there was one back east where my friend belongs, actually have the rabbi and the cantor in the shul on Friday night alone, nobody else, but it's live rabbi and cantor.
Yes.
How do you feel about that?
I personally don't like it, and I'll tell you why.
Because it's Shabbat and using a camera?
That's part of it. But my biggest concern with it is that I don't think it sounds very, very nice. And it also, a synagogue, an empty synagogue, and even if I did it in my house, there's something about that that to me, in my mind, is it's okay maybe if I had to do it once, but there were a lot of people, and again, a lot of entertainers who didn't want to, because again, not having a community, not having a group together, it becomes, listen, Hal, I don't like the attention in the best of circumstances. I don't like the focus to be on me. When there's no community there, it's even worse. And it's, to me, it's in the same kind of realm of the Jewish tradition. And again, I don't want to, and be very careful with what I'm going to say right now.
Community now. I mean, if we don't have a live minyan, we have an online minyan.
Yeah. So
sanction. So you and the cantor standing 6 feet apart at the bima at the shul, not be appropriate.
If we could have a conversation, but we can't have a conversation during the service. We can't.
Right.
This is fine. It's not my ideal, but the great thing is we're getting generally more people. We had less people tonight than we've had. Last week we had twice as many people. I'm hoping this is an aberration, but I mean, it's great to have everybody we have, but we have people even today that are not in, next door. In the past weeks and yesterday, we had people from other states. Today, I don't see anybody from another state today, but we've had people from other countries join us in the last few weeks. Look, we did it for Passover, but at least at Passover Seder, we could have other people. We could have other people participating. To have a service like that where people aren't participating, number one, I don't find it very, personally, I don't find it very moving. But I also find it almost like a show, and I almost find that it is contrary to the concept of even having a minyan, which is that the people are inhabiting the space together, and that their voices are at least as important as the rabbi or cantor. I honestly feel that. And that's one of the reasons why our services, we do participatory singing. I personally cannot stand synagogues where the cantor gets up in front of everybody and sings as a performance. This isn't spiritual to me. It is for some people, by the way. Not a lot, by the way, but it is for some people. Look, if people want that, we're not the right synagogue for them. And I'll tell people, there's a lot of synagogues out there, and there are some that are performance-based. That's a great place for people who want a performance. My feeling, our community is, even before I got there, and one of the reasons probably why I was chosen to be the rabbi was because I believe in participatory worship. I believe that everyone's voice is equal in the synagogue, and the cantor should not be singing over the congregation. So this is a really important thing for me. And when it's done that way, it is even worse. By not showing our faces during the songs, my feeling is that when we're doing the prayer, we're doing online what we should be doing in the sanctuary, which is connecting with the words, connecting with the music, connecting with the intention of the prayer, and not with the person singing it, which is why I'm trying to use visuals, which if I had my way, which even though it's not really, it's kind of contrary to Shabbos and the idea of visuals, I would have images going around us in the sanctuary all the time. I'm not saying it would be like the Laserium, but I would love to have a situation where the surrounding vibe around us was more conducive than the one it is now for spirituality. We have a pretty simple sanctuary, obviously, but the aesthetics should also be part of the worship experience. Listen, Hal, I've thought about this a lot. I'm trying to make this as seamless as possible so that people can be part of a service and not feel like they're not part of it. That's the most important operating feature to our service, is that you feel as much a part of it as you can with the recognition, without you're not there. Generally speaking, the feedback, I'd say generally, so far it's been unanimous. That doesn't mean that everybody feels that way, because not everybody communicates and says, hey, what I don't like about this. But we're trying to do both. We're trying to, when it's proper to do participation for a service like the Seder, absolutely. When we have participation like this in a class, this is what this is great for. But I don't love the service online, having to do that. It is not a Shabbos worship experience the way I would envision it. So if people say, oh, wouldn't it be great if we could do this every week? No, it wouldn't be great if we could do this every week. I do not like not being able to see people. I do not like the distance that I have from people through this. Even if we can talk and Skype and message during the service, I don't like it. And I'm doing it, and I'm trying to do the best that I can. It's a whole lot of work to do what we're doing. It's 10 times more work than if I stood in front of a empty sanctuary. When I'm telling you 10 times the work, hell, it's probably 15 or 20 times the work sometimes. It was the first few weeks. But the important thing is that we're trying, what we do every time, every week, every day, even when we're not in coronavirus, do our best. Do what we can at the level that we can do it, the best way we can do it. And so that's what I'm trying to do now, is the best we can do.
The visuals are beautiful.
Yeah.
I agree with the sentiment. I do. I see your point. Personally, I would find it more personal if I did see, my own opinion, if I did see you and the cantor at the Bima, at Beth Ami, although you're there alone, and we're participating, we're singing, as we're all speaking now.
But I couldn't hear you. The point is that the technology is such, at least now, maybe in 5 years, maybe 2 years with what we're doing right now, maybe when we're on a 5G system, that we'll be able to visually put you in front of us. But right now, if I was leading services, and even if I had a giant screen, I couldn't see 10 people. I definitely couldn't see 20 people. So it's very hard. Look, it could be that we are heading to a point in time where the technology is there. It's not where we need it to be yet, but where we could have a virtual or augmented experience. Really, it's more of an augmented service where I could look out into a room. You could look out into the room, and it would look in an augmented experience like I was there when I wasn't there. And I would see you as if you were there. So we literally populate a sanctuary with augmented, with you there virtually. We have the technology to do it. We don't have the speeds, and we don't have the it's basically seeing a hologram of somebody, that we could do this. I mean, we know we're very close to it. This isn't far away times anymore. It's not like the Star Trek holodeck. We're really close to doing this.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
this is Kelly Wasserman.
Yeah.
So I know at my work, but it's very expensive system. We're able to get Los Angeles, New York, UK, all on a Cisco system where it looks like we're all sitting at one large table together. And it's all real time. It's really nice, but it's very, very expensive. So, I mean, the technology for that type of gathering where you see everybody, it's there, but it's just very expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. What are you watching? Are you looking at this through your computer?
No, what it is, you have to go to these particular rooms that each location has multiple rooms of, and it's through Cisco, and you just sit at these desks, and when you get everyone together, it just looks like you're at a big round desk together.
Right. So you're actually going.
We're looking at screens around us. We have screens all around us.
Yeah, and you're going to a facility that has that.
Yes. We had to go to it's a special conference room.
Yeah, so that's what I'm talking about. So that's where the technology is today. I don't know how it's going to manifest in the future for us. So what you just talked about is exactly what I'm talking about, and we have it today, and we can get a group of what's prohibitive is the visual media that we put this on, right? Because you have to go to a room that has the ability to have these screens that can display this. So if you have a wraparound screen in front of you as a television, which would literally have to be 60 inches. I mean, I don't know how it's going to work in a person's home. It will happen eventually. Maybe 5 years from now, we'll have a wraparound screen. You'll go into essentially a room in your house, and you will be able to, it will look like you're standing in front of a room of people. But we have the technology to, as you said, to do it. It's very expensive. But the other piece is we have to be able to mass produce the way for people to have that in their own homes.
Well, I was thinking about something more simply, and you're right. If you wanted participation, we're not there yet. I was thinking of just being able to see you and the cantor singing. You're streaming it. We're watching. We see that. You don't see us. I understand. We're not participating with you, but we're seeing you as opposed to images and lovely pictures, so forth. It's actually very nice the way it's been put together. But we're seeing you at a bima. I think there's some value in that.
Yeah.
But
the only problem with it, I've looked at it on some of the music that Alyssa put together, some of the stuff that Alyssa put together, she was singing with the guitar.
Right.
I will tell you that in my guess is that people would get sick of that pretty quickly. And it didn't sound as good, but that's a whole nother issue, is it didn't sound as good. Let's say we got over that sound issue. It doesn't sound as good. The issue again there's another issue, by the way, too, which is we talked about doing it live. I have less of a concern with the Shabbat issue, because you can make the argument we could turn on the cameras. The cameras were turned on before Shabbos. We're not doing anything other than really turning on a light, right? So you could actually argue you could do it and not violate Shabbat. You would be at home unless, again, your computer was turned on before Shabbat or it went on with a timer. So there are ways to do it,
right,
and not violate it. The bigger problem is I have found, and we found it the very first week we did this, the technology does not always work. And if, God forbid, the technology goes down in the middle of the service and the internet drops, the service is over. And that is another issue that I didn't want to have happen. So technically speaking, if we go down with the Facebook stream of our service is already up on YouTube. We can tell people immediately, go over to YouTube. The service is playing right there on YouTube. So we actually are able to get over one of the bigger problems, which is the technology failing. I will tell you, if I was doing a service and the technology went down, it would ruin my Shabbat. You can never get me out of that irritation and funk for that Shabbat. It would ruin my Shabbat if my service that I felt responsible for, and again, it wouldn't be my fault. The technology goes down. Maybe it is my fault, but even if it wasn't my fault, I'd still feel terrible. So I am concerned about it. I am more concerned about it from the standpoint of disappointing people and worrying about it, let's say, than and anything else. I'm still worried about it, by the way, even when we're streaming it live on YouTube and on Facebook, even when it's been taped ahead of time, I'm still worried about it.
Yeah.
But I will tell you how the more religious congregations, conservative and Orthodox synagogues, that are streaming services are all streaming them taped. So it definitely gives you more control. I understand now why Stephen Colbert and other shows, I always kind of laughed at this concept of live on tape. I get it now, because you do want to have the ability to edit and control it a little bit, because it doesn't feel good to have something go south when you're so close to getting it right. So sometimes I mean, you're involved with things that are just bad and don't work from the very beginning. But a service should never be that way. A service, our tradition gives us a wonderful service, and we should do well by it. We owe our tradition and owe our people the opportunity to do well by it. So we're trying, and I will tell you that every week I want it to be different, and I'm able to do stuff that I couldn't do. I'm going to tell you a secret as we wrap up. We've already lost a few people, but it's a good discussion, and you can all take it with you and share it with people who are wondering why we're doing Friday night the way we're doing it, because I'll never explain it like this. I won't explain it during the service. I'm able to bring together 3 or 4 different cantorial voices at one time. I would never be able to do that. Financially, we're too limited hardly any synagogues do that. I mean, they have to be pretty wealthy to be able to have 3 or 4 cantors on the stage at any given time. I mean, Stephen S. Weiss can do it. There are other synagogues I know that can afford to do it. Maybe they won't be able to do it, by the way, some of those synagogues in a month or so, but I am so blessed to be able to bring together some great voices that I can do this way that I couldn't do any other way. So it is one of the great parts of this service is now being able to mix up voices in the same service. And that's one of the things that people have enjoyed. I'm going to say it's one of the things that I've really enjoyed, is being able to hear Kenny's voice and Alyssa's voice and Wendy's voice and this young woman, Isabel, who's doing a lot of the songs, who's a very young woman. She's, I think, 21, friend of Dina's. That's a great musician. She's sung a few beautiful melodies the last few weeks. So that to me has been one of the great blessings. The biggest blessing, though, is the amount of people that are able to join us, and the fact that we're getting people who would never be able to come to services because they live in Colorado or Arizona or Las Vegas or Missouri or New York or Germany, or all the places that we've been able to have people join us over the last few weeks, over the last month. It's hard to believe it's been a month now. This Friday night will be 4 weeks that we did online service. So that's the best part, is bringing together people from all over. But in my explanation, since you brought it up, this is the 2 benefits are the variety we can add and that. And then the third thing I said at the beginning is less focus on me, because I really don't I never wanted the service to be about me ever, Hal. So I appreciate you saying you want to see me, but I really want you to know I never want to be a distraction for the service, and I always worry that I am. So I don't want to be. And this way, I'm not. So thank you, everybody, for being here tonight, and please be with us on this Shabbos of in between, again, during the Omer period. It's a time for reflection and introspection normally, even more so now. So hopefully we can take a little joy on Shabbos to help us through this period. And let's hope the Omer period lasts longer than the quarantine period, though it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. God willing, we'll be able to be out of our houses by the end of Omer. So again, tonight is the 7th night of Omer. Hayom Yom Shvi'i LaOmer, and stay healthy, everybody.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. Bye.
Good night.